We might start. At least I can start by introducing myself and our speaker, but I will begin. I'm Lynette Russell, and I'm the Chief Investigator on the Global Encounters and First Nations Peoples, a thousand years of Australian history. It's an ARC laureate program that has been running since 2020, and we have these monthly seminars, which are often very well attended and extremely enlightening. For a long time, I've been hoping that we would snafu Professor Tom Murray to talk tonight. So this is fantastic. I begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the unceded lands of the traditional owners. In my case, it's the people of the Kulin Nation, Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong people here in Naarm, or otherwise known as Melbourne. And I also pay my respects to elders past and present on any of the lands that other people are on tonight. So we start with that acknowledgement on all occasions. Tonight's, as I said, I'm really pleased that we've been able to welcome Professor Tom Murray from Macquarie University. One of the things I do studiously study is when they announce ARC grants, particularly the fellowships, and I was extremely excited to see this Tom Murray, who got a future fellowship, which included making of a film, which was going to be around the tree pang industry and particularly engagements and encounters with Macassar. So I'm delighted that tonight he's going to be speaking to us, not just about that film, but actually more about his film experience. He is the director and he's a very well experienced and extremely awarded filmmaker. His film Dakia and is it Dakia and the King is one of my favorites, and I've often used it in teaching. It's a really powerful story, but it's also a powerful piece of storytelling. So thank you for that, Tom. So Tom's going to talk tonight on trading stories, global encounters, trade, and cultural exchange. As usual, if you've got any questions, please hold them to the end, pop them in the chat, or alternatively put your hand up when we get to the discussion part, and I will attempt to make sure that everybody gets a chance to say what they want to say. So thank you, Tom. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Lynette. It's really great to be here with you all. I have seen your laureate fellowship over a long period of time and all the amazing things that are kind of coming out of it and wanting to be some kind of part of it. So it's great that we finally, all these years in, got to kind of make this connection. I will share my screen, and I've got a talk that's prepared. It's pretty loose, so we got plenty of time to kind of talk about stuff. As you can see there, it's called Trading Stories, Global Encounters, Trade and Cultural Exchange. So, as Lynette said, I'm predominantly a filmmaker, and I've made a few films before I came into academia. And for me, the academy was a way to keep making the kind of stories that I was hoping to make. And I've been lucky enough to have had a DECRA and now a future fellowship to kind of tell some of these stories. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a kind of background. Um, I should say that I've checked out the seminar series that you guys have put on, and it's pretty amazing, the different speakers you've had over the last few years. So congratulations to everyone in kind of curating such a wonderful bunch of speakers, and I'm of course delighted to be finally part of it. I've titled this talk Trading Stories because my main interest as a documentary maker and as a scholar is about the human encounter and its potential in the context of connection and mutuality, and conversely, encounters defined by otherness, hostility, and conquest. My specific curiosity has been to understand how the otherness of the Indigenous European encounter in Australia has been manifest through the colonial occupation of Indigenous lands, an occupation, of course, that's been supported by global and national legal structures over the last 250 years. I grew up on the northern beaches of Sydney, and I'm here on Garigal land now, and growing up here, the absence of Indigenous people was really a profound thing. So I wanted to say a little bit about myself and my speaking position, so to speak. So I'm kind of a white male settler Australian, an immigrant who came to Sydney as a child. There I am. I've just arrived. So I was brought here by working class English parents who wanted a better life than was possible in England, given the challenges of the class system that they faced there. My parents tossed up whether to live in Canada, New Zealand, or Australia, and life choices all determined, of course, by the historic colonial Anglo occupations of those places and by the trade in stories. So I have called this trading stories because one of the stories that circulated in working class northern towns like Leeds and Middlesbrough, where my parents were from, was that Australia was an egalitarian land of opportunity. And they bought that story, came here and did their best to manifest it. So um, I want to give that story a little bit of kind of further context. My parents were school teachers and later university lecturers, middle class occupations, and that's significant, that offered them social mobility and financial security. But like many other people, they became aware that their wealth didn't come completely from their wealth in Australia, the toil in Australia. It may not have been immediately obvious to them as immigrants, but eventually they came to realize that they were beneficiaries of the annexation and sale of Indigenous lands, and the ability, of course, to turn those lands to economic profit and pass that wealth on to some sections of the Australian community, such as property owners like themselves. This awareness of their situation and its relationship to Indigenous Australia came from the trading of other kinds of stories, stories that emanated from or with the support of the Academy, and were told by people like Charles Perkins and Curthoys, Henry Reynolds, Russell McGregor, Heather Goodall, Peter Reid, Marcia Langton, Patrick Wolfe, Lyndall Ryan, Lynette Russell here, Bain Atwood, and many others. So these kind of stories written in books throughout the 80s and 90s were hugely significant. And the narratives that they contained projected another image of Australia. And in this way, they laid the ideological platform and the urgency for a process of national reconciliation between the settler colonial state and First Nations people. Um, Obviously, courts do not operate in a cultural vacuum, and much of my work has been in Northeast Island land, so I'm very aware that the Gove land rights case before Justice Blackburn in 1971 did not allow for the Yolngu claim to own their land. But by 1992, in the context of all this scholarship, these ideas and stories that are in circulation in the Australian community, the High Court handed down the Mabo decision, which rejected the doctrine that Australia was terra nullius, land belonging to no one, of course, at the time of European settlement. In 1993, Parliament consolidated the Native Title Act, a national system for the recognition and protection of native title. And in 1996, the High Court handed down the Wick decision, which confirmed that native title rights could coexist with pastoral and leasehold tenures, but that pastoral leases do not necessarily extinguish native title. All of these decisions were in recognition of the conditions of colonial settlement and Indigenous connection to land. So for many people in the community, people like my parents and myself, these stories in the media and then repeated over dinner tables gave us a different image of Australia and Australian history, one that led to over 250,000 people marching for reconciliation in the year 2000 during the Howard government years. So I think I probably haven't told you much that you don't already know, but I give you this context because this is the broader social context of my own upbringing and for my first documentaries in 1998 and 2000. I should also offer some kind of an apology because it's always a little bit sort of potentially narcissistic to give a talk which is about your own work when you're talking about something like global encounters. But anyway, I hope you'll forgive me that. Um, so my own kind of documentaries, 1998 and 2000, I'll try to play you a little bit of oh, what's happened to you? Okay, these early documentaries. One the first was called Along the Pituri Trail in 1998, an ecological history of the early exploration of the Simpson and Strzelecki deserts and the indigenous Pituri trade, the impact of cattle on arid land ecologies. And then I'll talk a little bit about a subject area that many of you know a lot about, a documentary I made in the year 2000 on Trepang. So this is uh, a map of some of the trading routes of the Pituri trade in Central Australia. You can see from the map in the top left there, the basic area it's talking about, north of Katitanda, Lake Eyre. There's a big area of where in the dunes, the sand dunes there, was a trade in an Aboriginal narcotic called Pituri. So I'll see if I can play you something from that. So this documentary was based around a couple of different things. One was the ecological damage being done by cattle in those areas, the arid lands. And it was following the journal of an explorer called William Oswald Hodgkinson. And I'll give you a little bit from the radio documentary from Hodgkinson's journal.
The Northwest Expedition. July 11th, Kunji Station. Left Kunji with much regret. The natives of this locality display a demeanor to us which is invariably pacific and cheerful. But the process of European occupations must tend to the usual result and consign them to the fate of Aboriginal tribes in general.
So this was William Hodgkinson in 1876. In 1861, the Burke and Wills expedition had gone through the arid lands, and the sole survivor, King, had been kept alive by Aboriginal people in the southern parts of those deserts, and he'd been given a native called Pituri. And when the first of the relief expeditions came and found King, he was raving about this narcotic. So William Hodgkinson then took a while to get some funds, and he went back in 1876 to try to find this native narcotic Pituri. So this is, you can find that still. It's up on the Radio National website. Unfortunately, that social history documentary area, hindsight, is no longer there. It's really hard to find 1 hour radio documentaries these days. But that was a 1 hour documentary following Hodgkinson's journal. And one of the things that really interested me, and one of the things that got me into the idea of trade, which I then followed up to do a documentary on the Trepang trade, was when you can read, I mean, Hodgkinson was a smart guy, and he was also very determined to survive, I guess, first of all, but to find this native narcotic, Pituri. And what he realized that Burke and Wills hadn't 15 years earlier was that his best chance was to actually engage with all of the Indigenous people that he met along the way and to ask them questions and listen to their answers. And so there's a quote from his journal there that you can see. One time he went and shot an emu and gave it, I think, to Dieri Nation people in the southern Simpson Desert. And he said, and that's from his journal, this gift quite delighted them. And as some recompense, one young lady danced for our amusement and exhibited her musical skill by playing on a leaf held between her lips and modulated by a blade of grass in the fashion of a Jew's harp, which is an oscillating instrument that people play with. So Hodgkinson had a lot of these encounters where he writes about it, and you can really get the sense of encounter that he passes over this gift of an emu that's been shot, and they have a night together where the celebrations and both his party and the Indigenous people that he was kind of sharing the emu with had a fun evening where they were sharing music and so on. And the Explorer's Journal, Hodgkinson's journal, gave real insight into these different encounters and also into the kind of lives that people were living at that point in 1876. So, which gets us to Pituri, gets us to the Tripang story. So following making that documentary, that was really interesting for me because there was a lot of different themes that were in that documentary. One, of course, was about the ecological devastation that cattle had made, so that the landscapes that that Hodgkinson was describing in 1876, when we were going through there in 1998, they bore very little resemblance to the ones he was describing, because the ecological damage of cattle was really quite profound. Or the water holes that he was talking about, where people were accumulating around and spending time on, had been so cattle trashed that they were beyond recognition. And that was the trade in Pituri. And Lynette were just talking before about the incredible trade in Tripang, but the trade in Pituri is also a trading route of global significance. There was objects traded, Baylor shell from the Gulf of Carpentaria, other objects from Spencer Gulf. So it actually covered the whole of Australia from north to south through different trading connections. And so that documentary, the response that people had was around just an idea of Aboriginal people with these very I think one of the most engaging things, I should say, for audiences when they were responding to that documentary was an understanding that there was very sophisticated trade across large areas of Australia, which then got me to think about the Tripang trade, of course. And having read Campbell McKnight's book, Voyage to Moregue, it was what I thought it hadn't been discussed enough in the Australian consciousness, that here Australia was connected to kind of global trade. And I know that that's central, Lynette, to your laureate fellowship, these kind of trades, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But I'll play you a couple of little bits from the radio documentary that we kind of made as a, so hopefully you guys can hear this.
I'm going to tell you a story from a long time ago. The Magatara first came here, called Magatara, from over there, from Nakasa. And those Magatara traveled here first with sails. The Magatara did not travel by outboard, by any other type of boat. No, just with sail. Its steering wheel wasn't like the one in this motorcar or any other boat. No, it was just paddle. Steering the boat like this, the big one came from over there.
These are the words of Macquarie Borawanga.
And they were my words 25 years ago. So that's from Macquarie Borawanga, recorded in the 1980s on Elcho Island, and he tells his version of the story of the Tripang trade. And it was pretty important to me at that point that we heard him first in Yongomata, and that he explained a lot about the trade from Elcho Island. So I'll play you another clip from that doco.
Soon afterward, we came to an anchor in 12 fathoms within musket shot, having a spring on the cable and all hands at quarters.
So Matthew Flinders coming up past the Blue Mud Bay, around the Gulf of Carpentaria, has just come past Blue Mud Bay, where they shot a man near Woodar Island, which was later the scene of another shooting that I made a film about called Ducky Elvis the King, and we'll get to that in a little while. And that was where Flinders talked about Australians for the first time. When he was talking about that, Flinders kind of kept sailing north through the up to present-day Yirrkala, and then west into the English Company Islands, and it's there that he comes across this big fleet of boats from Macassar. At first, he thinks that they're pirate boats and they're cautious, and yeah, this is from his journal.
Every motion in the whale boat and in the vessel alongside which she was lying was closely watched with our glasses, but all seemed to pass quietly. And on the return, we learned that they were prows from Macassar, and the 6 Malay commanders shortly afterwards came on board in the canoe. It happened fortunately that my cook was a Malay, and through his means I was able to communicate with them. The chief of the 6 prows was a short, elderly man named Obasu. He said there were upon the coast, in different divisions, 60 prows, and that Salou was the commander-in-chief. These people were Mohammedans, and on looking into the launch, expressed great horror to see hogs there. Nevertheless, they had no objection to port wine, and even requested a bottle to carry away with them at sunset.
So, and we'll come to this a little bit later again too, just trying to give voice to that journal and to give a sense of what that encounter might have felt like to Flinders, and to the men from Macassar too, of course, who left with a bottle of port after their meeting. Those little details I think are really interesting. And I wasn't sure if Campbell was going to be here tonight, but I thought I'd give a little bit of his voice from 25 years ago.
Treepeng was Australia's first modern industry. Modern in the sense that it was going into world trade patterns. It seems that they were getting, on average, about 300 tonnes of it from the Australian coast every year. Now, that was a lot. It was perhaps a quarter or a third of all the treepeng going into China. If you go and try and buy some today, it's worth about $50 a kilo. Now, $50 a kilo for 300 tonnes, you're talking sort of 16 million Australian dollars. I'm not saying that's a terribly accurate estimate, but we are talking about millions and millions of dollars.
So just trying to give a scale to the industry at that point in terms of its economic value and in terms of its breadth. And I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know when we talk about the trade, but from a Yolngu perspective, that people traveled far and wide, that people were in Macassar, of course, and were also traveling to Singapore, and the implications of that as people came to understand about how to deal with people from other places, about respect that is given to Yolngu land, and that becomes significant when a few years after the treepeng trade had finished from Macassar in 1907, when Japanese people were also plying the trade, and there was not felt that there was the same respect, Yolngu word balagalili, of give and take between the traders, the Japanese traders, and the Yolngu people. And this led to a group of Japanese treepengers being killed in Callan Bay in 1932, which Japu people said was because one of their leaders was slapped in the face by trepenguts and was disrespected, and so he ordered his sons to kill the Japanese people, and a bunch of Japu clan people killed some Japanese, and that set in train a sequence of events that led to a man called Dakia Wirpanda going to face court in Darwin in 1933-34, and oh, there you go. That's in that radio documentary that I made on Trepang, which is also still on there. If you Google hindsight Trepang trade, you can get that radio documentary. Unfortunately, they've cut off it's only 45 minutes and the actual thing is 53, so they've cut off the last 8 minutes. So I'll have to send you the last 8 minutes if you're interested. But one of the key intellectual discussants in that film was a remarkable woman called Ramacho Marika, and she explained that the critical part of the Yolngu trade with Makassar was that it contained this sense of bala galili, which was give and take, and that was what was missing from the later relationship with the later experience with Japanese Trepangers, and also with the colonial occupation, of course, from the European annexation of Yolngu lands. A couple of images which you guys will be familiar with from bark paintings of Macassan boats and rock paintings of Macassan boats. I'll skip through these because these are all going to be quite familiar to you. There's some of the drawings from the burnt collection with boats in. And so that's the film that I made, Dakia versus the King. And this is ongoing in the sense I made that film over 20 years ago, but the search for justice that for Dakia's family is ongoing. I just recently wrote an article for The Guardian on a coroner's report. We've been lobbying family and others for a long time that there should be an inquest into the disappearance of Dakia. So spoiler alert if you haven't already seen the film. Because the Japanese were killed, there was the Japanese government lobbied the Australian government to have some justice, and so some police were sent to investigate what happened. And as a result of that, in 1933, one of the policemen, Constable Albert McCall, was killed on Woodah Island, the same island that Flinders had earlier shot a man at. And then there was a huge outcry in the Northern Territory that there should be a punitive expedition to teach, inverted commas, oh no, actually it was a statement by the Northern Territory Administrator to teach the blacks a lesson, and that police expedition very nearly came to pass. It was only because of demonstrations across the country, led in many parts by the Communist Party actually, but demonstrations from religious groups and from other groups, anti-slavery groups, that in the end they sent what they called a peace party of missionaries who asked Dakia to go to Darwin and face court, which he did, and he was found guilty and sentenced to death for the murder of the policeman, which he admitted to his defense counsel that he'd done. But procedurally there was lots of problems, and so the High Court overturned that, but Dakia was never seen again. And the reason to bring that story up in this context is that it was very strongly part of Yolngu understandings of dealing with others, that that what had happened in the case of Albert McCall and the police party who'd landed on Woodah Island and chained up a group of women, it was not appropriate. This was under Yolngu law. This was certainly not allowable, but given that they'd had a whole history of connection with people from Makassar and their law had been respected over this time, that was also part of the reason that Dakyar acted in the way that he did. Another film that I made up in Northeast Island directly after that film, Dakyar versus the King. I wanted just to say a couple of things about the nature of filmmaking. And in trying to create the voice, for example, of Matthew Flinders in that last documentary, the human voice is very evocative. And in storytelling, it allows us to get very much more deeply, I think, into a story often than words on a page. And here you can see in this shot with Orson Welles. Orson Welles made a lot of historical films, and he was very strongly of the opinion that you had to use close-ups and you had to get close to characters because it was the human. If you had used too many wide shots, then it would look like, you know, a bunch of people in dress-ups. But the moment you got close to the human face, you can see the humanity of the people represented. And so that's been quite significant in the documentaries, the audiovisual documentaries that I've made, that you can actually get close and feel the humanity of the people that are being represented, particularly when I started, and it was not so common to see Indigenous people on screen as protagonists, heroes, and so on. This is also part of Emmanuel Levinas, a scholar of the Holocaust, who spoke often about the capacity of the human face to speak to us across culture. In documentaries, one of the problems, and it's less so in audio documentaries, is that what's represented on screen can be taken very literally. And, you know, we know that in period dramas. So as I come and I'm turning in some ways to thinking about and to making a new documentary, having made a radio documentary, making an audiovisual documentary about the relationship between historical peoples and contemporary times, the significance of those relationships. It's a real problem in documentary that what you represent can sometimes be taken very literally. And it's been an interesting kind of new development in historical documentary and also in drama, that people are much more used and allowable for anachronism. And of course, there's been a bunch of kind of works where been set in the past, but with very modern material culture being represented. And this is kind of one of the things that we're looking at with a film with Yolngu people in Makassar. I'm very interested in the idea of historiophony. So you're very familiar with the idea of historiography, of course, of written histories and the history of written histories. I'm very interested in the kind of the history of in histories on screen. And I've also done some animations, and so this is a very powerful, incredible film. It's got lots of dream sequences and about the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is obviously very much in people's minds, including mine at the moment. But the capacity of the image to tell a story is a different kind of history telling. And so once again, we're thinking about, and the term historiophony comes from Hayden White, and he wrote a lot about the capacity of the audiovisual image to tell historical stories. Again, particularly with traumatic events, there's a range of different ways of dealing with those in audiovisual storytelling. This is from a film, another amazing film by Riti Pan, a Cambodian filmmaker who was dealing with the trauma in Cambodia and massacre there through using these figures, and it's a very powerful way of thinking through and telling stories that again doesn't deal kind of with the need to tell a literal truth. And you guys are probably all familiar with this film set in Indonesia around the 1965-66 violence there, the act of killing by Joshua Oppenheimer and others. And in this film, they reenact, there's kind of purposeful reenactments of a whole bunch of sequences. The twist in this one, of course, is that the reenactments are done by the perpetrators of the violence. And in one of my last films, The Skin of Others, we had a whole bunch of reenactments that were done in that film. So I'm very interested in the capacity of reenactment and the way that you can, within the text, the film text, contextualize those different reenactments. And this film, Two Laws, is a really great example of how that was done in Borroloola, which was and in this film, within the text of the film, Aboriginal communities are discussing how various kind of scenes should be represented, who are then dramatized in front of the camera. So that's another way of coming at the telling of these stories. So I'm kind of thinking out loud with you guys here on these, because these are all different ways to tell historical stories in Indigenous contexts and in other contexts that are going to be relevant to the film that I'm in the process of making about Yolngu connections with Macassar. I actually have put up the wrong one here, because I had some film bits that I was going to show you, and I'll show a couple of these different film bits, and then I'll go back to, or maybe I can just go to them directly.
When the Jambalping shark swam up here, he spoke Jambalping language. This is where he called Takir's name. This is where our journey starts. He called our name, Tuli Chapu. That's our clan. Our journey was broken that day when those two laws was met at Wood Island. Then another law was going ahead of us that we black people didn't know.
I'll leave that bit there, but why I was wanting to show you that, which is the opening to the film Takiya vs. the King, was that we were trying to represent to audiences, and I think probably now if I did that, I would have done that story in Yolngu first, and then had the English translations. But at that time, 2003, this was a film that was broadcast for the ABC TV, and the sense from the executives we were working with was that we really needed to have something in English to start, so that audiences wouldn't be disenfranchised from the beginning, which was kind of interesting, because part of it in telling that story was to actually create a sense of the otherness and strangeness of Yolngu law for peoples, because this was a place that was created by the Jamapingu shark, and it was the Jamapingu shark that gave law to that part of the country. So we were actually talking to that, but yeah, so that was about what was behind the encounter that someone like Albert McCall, the policeman who wandered into those lands to enact his law, the Westminster law that he was carrying, so that he would have had no idea at all, no concept of the fact that he was coming into a country that was so profoundly occupied by Yolngu law, and obviously that was a tragedy for McCall. I'll show you. Actually, maybe I'll just leave it there. I've got 45 minutes. I was going to show you a little bit of a film that I'm working with, wanting to talk back to, I guess, dominant culture, medical regimes that are being imposed on your people, was to just kind of to reiterate the idea that although in, say, Ducky, I was the king, that encounter and the incapacity to understand other that sits behind it was in 1933, 1934, many of the same issues are still being encountered by people today. But I'll stop there that in a little bit, but I think it'll be interesting for everyone if we can listening. It was apologies if it was kind of a loosely collected bunch of thoughts and ideas and old work, but yeah, I hope you got something out of it.
Thank you, Tom. I certainly did. You were breaking up towards the end, and I don't know if that was just my internet or yours, but let's hope that's finished now. I have to agree with you. I share your sadness at the demise of hindsight. Michelle Rayner did an amazing job, and she was fabulous. And I guess she's still doing some things with the ABC, and Kirsty Melville, some of the work that she's been doing too. But yeah, we do need that long form, an hour of really exploring things I guess everything's gone podcast now, but that's okay. I want to open it up so that other people can ask questions. But I've just got a couple of points here. I'm guessing you must have seen some significant changes and shifts in the technological side of filmmaking, because we've got Fikri on the line here, and Fikri and our colleague Budi Sicilianto made a couple of short documentaries using their iPhones down in amongst the Panisi boat building section, which is down in South Sulawesi, but towards the east, which
Bira Tanabaru.
Yes, we went to Biratama. It was amazing, truly remarkable. But I just wondered how much that might affect the evolution of the way that you tell stories and the narrative, obviously the way that you drive your narrative, and how much the technology might have influenced that, or the shift in technology.
Thanks, Lynette. Yeah, it's a good question, and it's very uppermost in my mind, because we have the capacity to really do quite amazing simulated things. So over the last 5 or 6 years, I've kind of scored a bunch of I'm at Macquarie University, internal grants around infrastructure that we've inherited the whole facilities of the Australian Film, Television and Radio School when they moved to Fox Studios. So we've got incredible studios and an incredible green screen, and now I've got a whole bunch of cameras that we can simulate different we're calling them virtual worlds. So I can make from photographs and paintings. I can recreate Makassar circa 1880. I can put people there. I can have objects that are in that picture plane that we've created, and have people moving through it so that the perspectives all look okay. I mean, what used to be the case when you worked on kind of green screen is that sometimes, the objects kind of didn't move in the right way. Anyway, we can do all of that. So one of the possibilities with this film is to shoot sections of it in studios where we've recreated a lot of these different environments where Yolngu people would have been there, like in the 1860s, 1870s. And one of the things that I put into my future fellowship application was that we know quite a few things now from the work that Campbell McKnight and others have done, for example, about the industry and the archaeological kind of records that people have been kind of working on. We've got a much stronger idea of the scale, the timing, but what we don't have a huge understanding of is what it might have been like in the domestic spaces of Makassar, and what would the experience have been like? I mean, there's that wonderful photograph, also a bit sad, of Yolngu people in Makassar from the 18. It's up behind you, is it? Oh, yes, there it is. I can see it directly. Which give you an idea of those people there at that point, and children and others. So we get a sense of that. But what would it have been like to have gone back to, you're a young person from basically a village, and I mean, there's that great recorded by the Burnts, Jalat Jari saying, I was there and there were so many people, I couldn't see them all. That the kind of incredulity of the scale of those cities. So, I mean, interesting to play with what a lot of those different kind of ideas of the Yolngu people being in domestic spaces. So the technology allows us to do some of that. Obviously, there's a lot of guesswork involved in between.
I don't know if you've had the opportunity to do this, and I think it would be a fantastic thing to incorporate. We spent some time in Leiden last year in the Netherlands, and at the archive there, which is essentially the Royal Dutch Archives, which is based at the University of Leiden. They have an extraordinary collection of photographs, or historical photographs of Makassar. And having been to Makassar more regularly and more recently, I could barely recognize anything. It was just it was quite open, the spaces, the streets were huge. It'd be worthwhile having a look at what's available at the Leiden archive.
I've probably only so far got, I don't know, 10 different photographic images that I've been using, but yeah, that's a good tip to get some more materials from Leiden. I mean, I've always been like, what would, like the way that Yolngu work in terms of name gifting. So, there's a really wonderful dancer who danced with Bangara who got gifted the name Jakapura because
Abdi Karya.
Yeah. Well, so being gifted that name, an ancestor that spent time in Singapore, and so and Campbell McKnight was telling great stories about people, having English language when explorers were coming through and being able to express back in English from time in Singapore. So those kind of stories, I think, are really kind of ripe and important to tell to kind of larger audiences. And I mean, I've got two little kids, 12 and 9, and fifth grade, they were learning all about Makassar, which I was like, how wonderful, because I back in 2000, it was really hard to get information about it. So that's great.
That's fantastic. I'm knee deep in writing a high school book on Makassar and on the treepang industry, so I'm really excited by that. But Ian McNiven's just asked a question. I'll let you ask it, Ian.
Yeah. Hi, Tom. Thanks for the seminar. I've seen on YouTube people animating old photos using AI.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, as a filmmaker, what you think of that as a technique for sort of trying to bring the past alive? Because some people think it's a bit creepy.
Well, there are instances where it's really creepy. I guess it depends. It's like any technology. It depends how you use it. And so, and how it's framed within your kind of work. Like if you're letting people know somehow that's one of the reasons why just showing those last couple of docos, um, in each of those, it's framed how what you're going to see is a reenactment. It's a reenactment in these kind of forms. So I think if you frame those things kind of in a correct way, then even the creepiness of the technology, which is kind of creepy, that
Mm,
it you audiences can understand where it's kind of coming from, and it can have really wonderful applications, like
mm,
absolutely amazing.
mm,
And I mean, I guess in kind of part answer to that, but also in answer to some things that Lynette was asking, I'm just doing a virtual reality 360 film on um, the Waka uh, migrations around in Polynesia. So we filmed um, on boats with uh, poor masters who have the knowledge of celestial navigation that was kind of brought back through the kind of Polynesian Renaissance brought from the Hawaiians. And so we did that, but we've been using a whole lot of AI to to deal with some of the archival materials, which isn't, are not really in great condition. And so it's kind of, in that case, it's like such wonderful technology. We've been
mm,
able to up-res materials so that they can be screened onto a big dome cinema, and the quality of it is really good. Some of the archive has come up looking really quite amazing. So as a tool, just to kind of extend what you can do, it's wonderful. It gets totally creepy when you kind of uh, are using it to, in a way, cheat. You're using it to say things that um, you can't know and can't be said and are not true. Like as in that did not happen. So
mm,
I guess I think all technologies are really useful if used in a way that legitimates them with your audience. So your audience knows what's going on, then I think that's fine and great.
mhm. Cool. Thanks.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
I could see, no, I can't see any other questions. I just got a couple other quick comments.
Just quickly, actually.
Oh, please.
One of the images was of it was like a stormtrooper from Star Wars.
Yes.
Can you talk a bit about that? Like,
Was that your anachronism?
yeah, where did that image come from?
It's I actually can't remember where I got that image, but the point I was trying to make is that so for example with my last film, my last feature doc, it was a film called The Skin of Others, and we were doing a whole lot of stuff. It was about an Aboriginal soldier who went and fought in the First World War, a guy called Douglas Grant, and we were faced with a whole bunch of challenges there uh, in kind of recreating kind of the environments from the First World War. And one of the problems that well, basically the lead actor Tommy Lewis, who was playing Douglas Grant, who was the lead of Chandler Jim Blacksmith, an amazing actor. He died in the middle of production, spoiler alert. And so we had to think about how to kind of make the film that we were making when we only had half of it shot. And so there was lots of different kind of ways we were thinking of doing it. And there are kind of anachronisms that were we brought into that, which were, but again, vis-a-vis what I was talking about with Ian, we kind of made it clear and obvious that, these were an attempt to kind of think about the past through the present. And so they kind of made sense. So that was just silly image I've shown for a couple of different things where, you know, you're trying to tell a story and there's someone there with a plastic. That's apparently in lots of historical stuff. The thing that really, really pisses off the people that have to work in the VFX at the end is getting rid of all of the plastic bottles of water that are kind of found at various parts around the set when, you know, you're supposed to be in 1721.
Yeah. Wow, thank you.
No worries.
Well, we're getting really close to 7 o'clock, so we probably could call it a day. But I think David's got a fine. Have you got a vinyl slide for us, David? For
Yes. Give me 1 second.
actually an excellent segue, completely unplanned, but a wonderful segue from that last bit that we were talking about. And we'll just here you go, David. So, Global Encounters are going to have a special presentation in our next one called Alien Encounters and Indigenous Futurisms, Science Fiction, Film and TV. Now, it could just be that myself, Leonie Stevens and David Howarth are somewhat sci-fi nuts, and we had the opportunity to give a presentation to the Royal Anthropological Institute. This is, I think it was, it was all by Zoom because we didn't actually get to go there. But we had the opportunity to play with the idea of encounters, taking it from, you know, what we've been doing for the last few years, but moving it into science fiction. So thank you, Tom, for the completely unplanned. I think that's just a brilliant, shall we just say, serendipity. So I'd like to say thank you so much, Tom. It's really enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to seeing where you take it all next. And thank you. Hope we can stay in touch.
Good one. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I did have written a little bit about Indigenous futurisms and relationship
Awesome.
Afrofuturism and stuff like that. And we had at the very end of that film, The Skin of Others, there was a scene where we had a kind of yeah, it was a really wonderful moment actually in that film with Uncle Archie Roach, who's passed away, kind of dreaming of a different kind of another kind of future. And it was a wonderful kind of concept about a meeting place that we would all come to once, you know, we've actually tried to navigated this current space that we're in. It was kind of, it wasn't a utopian, wouldn't be right to call it, but it was a kind of a beautiful vision of a different kind of future that Uncle Archie gave us that we animated in that film. So if you get the chance to see The Skin of Others, check it out.
So I guess just the last thing for me to ask, Tom, is how accessible are your films and where can people see them?
The Skin of Others is I don't think it's on broadcast at the moment, but it's you can get it through Ronin.
Yep.
It's on their website, and you'll see the scene that I mean with Uncle Archie at the end of that. In the context we're just talking about, Ducky vs. the King is just on rotation on ABC and SBS. So if it's not on there at the moment, then it's available through the National Film and Sound Archive, who own
Pretty sure Monash has a copy of it in their audiovisual library.
Yeah, Canopy has it, and it's yes, there's a bunch in there. Yeah, I've got In My Father's Country. I'm actually not sure where people can get that.
Sorry, quickly, Tom. Anyone who can access things through the Monash Library, Alexander Street, which is like a streaming service you can get through Monash Library, has 3 of Tom's films.
Excellent.
There's the link. For those of you who can access Alexander Street either through Monash or through whatever other affiliation you have, yeah, there's 3 there and some on Canopy as well. But at the moment, Canopy is restricted. Monash, like I think Monash Library it doesn't want to pay for a full license.
Yes.
So we can't access Tom's film through Canopy at the moment, but we can through Alexander Street.
Fantastic. Thank you, David.
Those radio documentaries that I had there are still available on the web. So the one on Pituri and the one on Trepang, and there's a bunch of others that are still.
I might trouble you for the last 8 minutes.
It's a great fun. I bring it all home in the last 8 minutes, and they don't have it.
Absolutely. Excellent.
All right. Thanks heaps. It's great to
Thank you.
be part
Lovely
of
to
your
catch
seminar
up with you
series.
and
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
Lynette.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynette. Thanks, Ian. Bye.